Fireworks following our exclusive reporting on hidden text messages in the Alec Murdaugh appeal. Also, bad apples in law enforcement, including another arrested sheriff. Also, a story of redemption you won't want to miss. I'm Will Folks, the owner and founding editor of FITSNews.com. Welcome to another edition of your Week in Review. Let's dig in. So in our first segment this week, we have in studio, for a change, our inimitable, intrepid research director, Jen Wood, who has absolutely, once again, blown up the Murdaugh murders, crime, and corruption saga. Now, this was, to your credit, not an intentional detonation. You were not trying to start World War III with the Murdaugh lawyers and prosecutors here in the state of South Carolina. But Jen, your report earlier this month regarding hidden text messages in Alec Murdaugh's case back in the days surrounding the 2021 graphic murders of his wife and son, younger son, Paul Murdaugh, really set this story off and running again all over social media, people talking about it, and certainly sparked a war of words between Alec Murdaugh's attorneys and prosecutors in the office of Alan Wilson. But I want to back up before we get into that back and forth that we saw unfold this week and discuss its potential implications on Murdaugh's bid for a new trial, which I think the odds of that are still through the roof. If you're on Predicted or one of these other markets, I would bet yes. I would bet yes. But Jen, let's talk about the genesis of this report, and let's address specifically what you did allege and what you didn't allege. How did this report come to be, the one about the hidden texts?
Right. So in June, the trial of Michael Colucci was scheduled to begin in Berkeley County.
And who is he?
He is accused of murdering his wife, Sarah Colucci, in 2015. That went to trial initially in, I believe, 2018, and there was a hung jury. Mm-hmm. So they were going to retry that case. But just before the trial was scheduled to begin, the defense for Michael Colucci, who is led by Andy Savage down in the Lowcountry,
very prominent attorney,
filed a motion to dismiss the indictment based on prosecutorial misconduct, stating that the investigators had had a conversation with Sarah Colucci's mother before trial, where she said in the weeks before her death, she had told her that she wanted to kill herself by hanging herself. Mm-hmm. And that information...
It's pretty relevant.
Right. Very relevant, because that is how she ended up dying, was hanging. So that information...
Or that's how it was made to look, allegedly, according to prosecutors.
Or if you believe prosecutors, staged hanging. So that information, according to the defense, never got to them as part of the discovery process.
Was it prosecutorial misconduct, or is it investigator misconduct? Because we had some testimony from the prosecutor in that case claiming she never saw it. Do you buy that?
Well, they brought both the lead SLED agent, David Owen, who is the same lead SLED agent in the Murdaugh investigation, along with Megan Birchstead from the Attorney General's office, who led the first prosecution of Sarah
Formerly
Colucci.
Of the Attorney General. Correct.
The judge ended up quashing the indictment, but he did say he found that there was no indication of prosecutorial misconduct. Mm-hmm. But he said if they were to bring this in front of a grand jury again, they need to give the grand jury all of this information.
Right. Let them have that before they make a
decision. Right. So David Owen was testifying about, and this is what kind of sparked something to my brain, he was testifying about how he provided information to the prosecution team. So as a lead investigator, he conducts his investigation, and he said, in terms of text messages he gives to them, he gives them what he believes to be relevant to the case, to the investigation. And I thought to myself, that's really interesting because, as a prosecutor, if I were to be an attorney, I would want to see everything. I would want to determine if something was relevant or irrelevant. And same thing for a defense attorney. I'm not an attorney, so I'm not 100% sure how discovery works, other than you're supposed to provide the defense with everything. And it just kind of reminded me of a bunch of files that I had received following the the guilty
Murdaugh
verdict
trial.
and
Yeah.
Murdaugh's guilty verdict. And I thought to myself, there were some interesting text in there in the days right before and right after the murder that never made it to that official timeline that the SLED agent, Peter Vodosky, presented to the jury during the trial. And, you know, I could see why the prosecution wouldn't put it in there because I don't think it really would help their case necessarily. But to me, if I looked at him and I thought, well, gosh, why wouldn't the defense kind of start throwing this in there? Because you just could provide some reasonable doubt. So I just wanted to take a look at what was put in front of the jury and, why it wasn't used, and how information goes back and forth during a trial. That is the genesis of where that story came from.
And so as you're preparing that, your thinking is perhaps this was a strategic decision by the defense, because obviously you talked about this potential evidence, and let's be honest, who are we talking about here? We're talking about Curtis Eddie Smith.
Curtis Eddie Smith.
For the most part. I mean, there are a bunch of other messages here that are curious and need some explanation, but the key figure here is Curtis Eddie Smith, who was accused by Alec Murdaugh's attorneys in the weeks leading up to the big double homicide trial of actually being the killer in this case. And yet, despite being subpoenaed to testify, was never called by the state, nor was he ever called by the defense. But Jen, something happened after your story published. It quickly turned from a story about prosecutors controlling the narrative in front of a jury to potential, based on what defense attorney Dick Harpootlian told Fox News, potential withholding of what could have been exculpatory evidence. So Harpootlian goes on Fox News and blows this thing up, Jen.
Right. He said, if he had had that evidence, it may have changed his decision to not call Curtis Eddie Smith. And it was adamant he had not received this in the course of discovery. So I thought that was really interesting. Another reason looking at this information is so interesting to me is that as the odds of a new murder trial for Alex go up, that trial is going to look drastically different. I mean, it's going to be a whole, you're looking at a defense team that knows the prosecution's playbook. So it's going to be very different. And, in looking at that stuff, I wanted to look at that in that lens as well. So, yeah, he told Fox News he didn't have it. And I was like, ooh.
And Curtis Eddie Smith is not just a random acquaintance. It's important to point this out. This is a guy linked to drug activity, accused of drug activity, alleged to have conducted drug deals on the property where these murders took place, as someone who has been involved in what some would say appears to be potential money laundering activity, perhaps involving Alec Murdaugh, cashing tons of checks.
Millions of dollars of checks.
This is not just a guy who's like a family friend who could have had some proximity, but let's talk a little bit about these messages. In one of them, he's asking for a check.
Right. He says, and this, I believe it was between June 3rd or June 6th. I don't remember the exact date. Maggie and Paul were murdered on June 7th. Can you get me a check? I need to give these boys some more.
Now, the day after the murder, again, we don't know whether Smith's phone was on or off the night of the murder. We've heard rumors both directions, but the morning after or the day after, there's a message from him to Alec. Tell me what I've seen. Is it true? Tell me what I've heard. Is it true? That would indicate or seem to indicate
surprised.
Right.
But
then there was another message later, a little cryptic.
Meet me at the fishing hole. And there was clearly another individual. There's text going on between Alex, Eddie, and then there's another individual involved. And they were all going out to meet. What were they meeting for? Was Alex under surveillance at this time? There's so many questions. And I would think it just seemed, the timing seems odd, priority-wise.
Yeah, it's also important to remember this is a case where we still don't have murder weapons.
No.
Never found murder weapons in this case, despite purported exhaustive searches. So very interesting to hear these references. But let's talk a little bit about, Jen, what's happened in the aftermath of Attorney Harpootlian's revelations, because this thing blew up. And again, people were already very bullish on the possibility of Alec Murdaugh receiving a new trial. But this really, for a lot of people, sent it into the stratosphere. But I wanted to talk about some responses that we've received in the aftermath of Harpootlian's statements from the Office of Attorney General Alan Wilson. We reached out to them to find out what they thought of these claims that were made by Harpootlian, and the response we got was that they got everything. That every piece of information from the cell dumps of Alec Murdaugh's devices, plural, that's what they said, was turned over. Now, what was interesting about this is Kittle's statement further noted that the defense attorneys, according to him, received more information than the prosecutors did because, according to him, there was a taint team established which reviewed all of Murdaugh's communications to make sure that there were no attorney-client materials that were inadvertently provided to prosecutors. And Jen, this is where I think it gets interesting because this is a guy who had a ton of clients. He's a very prominent lawyer, the former head of the South Carolina Association for Justice, the Trial Lawyers Association. He's the former head of that organization. This guy's a huge lawyer down there. He's also an assistant solicitor down there. So he's got a ton of cases that he's involved in. But not only that, as the Murdaugh saga unfolded, we saw that there was just a broad spectrum of criminal investigations underway into Murdaugh and civil cases involving his alleged fleecing and cases involving his family members, including the late Paul Murdaugh. So there's a potential massive universe of potential attorney-client information. So we asked the Attorney General's office, what were your filters? What were you?
Right, because there were clear communications in the official timeline that were from clients. Him meeting a client at the office on June 7th in the morning and going back and forth. So why was that included, yet the Cousin Eddie stuff wasn't? Very bizarre.
Doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, we did ask the Attorney General's office to specify what they used for that taint review to filter all this information. We were told by Robert Kittle, basically nothing regarding that. They did not specify. He said all texts and information gathered from Alec Murdaugh's devices were timely provided to the defense prior to trial, and a record was kept of when discovery was provided.
I mean, when I was writing, it did cross my mind, what if they didn't have these? But quickly, I was like, there's no way. There's absolutely no way they would have withheld this. It just didn't. Yeah, it's not what I expected.
Mm-hmm. But we don't even know whether Curtis Eddie Smith's attorneys received all of this information.
Well, that's a good point because he still has not yet gone to trial.
Years later, we still got Curtis.
4 years later.
4 years later, no charges filed against Curtis Eddie Smith.
Well, they're filed. Or they're just pending.
Correct. Yeah.
There's been no adjudication, no trial, nothing.
So they're basically keeping him on ice. Mm-hmm. But he was let out of prison. He was detained during the trial. But a month or so after the trial, you remember we covered the hearing, he was released and bond was reinstated by Judge Clifton Newman, who presided over that trial. Just a lot of weird developments in this case, Jen. And when you couple this with the jury tampering allegations, with the alleged jury rigging, in fact, as Myra Crosby, the juror who was unceremoniously removed from that panel for refusing to state a preference, according to her. There's a lot of things that don't add up here.
Right. And there's just so many questions hanging out there for me. There's just the loose ends. That's what I call it. I think I did an article, the loose ends. When are they going to get tied up? Spencer Roberts and Jerry Rivers, two individuals that were indicted and in connection with Alex Murdaugh and Cousin Eddie's whatever was going on down there. They ended up pleading, so we don't really know a lot about those cases, like what they were indicted for, what led up to those charges, what were the allegations. We don't know much.
Well, I think you just put your finger on it. Whatever was going on down there, because we did some reports back in September of 2021, again, a long time ago, that began to pull some of the strings into allegations of drug running, allegations of money laundering at a very large scale. Certainly this is a part of the state where that behavior not not surprising to anyone.
Right,
I mean,
right.
cocaine built Hilton Head. I mean, come on. The drug smuggling, the gentleman smugglers. Jason Ryan, one of the guys who did a Murdaugh book, actually wrote a book about that smuggling operation. So this is a place that, those shipments and that money laundering structure certainly would be there. Was Murdaugh a part of that? Did he get too deep into it? Is that somehow something that led to what happened to his family members? Or was this a case exactly like the prosecution said, a guy who had been stealing a ton of money from his clients and had reached the end of the road and felt he had to do something drastic to deflect attention?
And, Dick Harpootlian has always said, they didn't, from day one, Alec Murdaugh was their suspect. They did not pursue any other avenues of investigation. And to me, these texts are really interesting because they kind of make that point. Did they pursue that? I don't know. I don't know. They could have tracked those people down, said, why were you meeting? What was, the purpose of the meeting? What were all these texts? What were these checks for?
And maybe they did.
Right. That could have happened. Very, very much so. And it got
maybe
nowhere.
Harpootlian is playing the press. I mean, the guy has been very good at that as it relates to this case. However, I think it's important to note the jury tampering allegations, when they dropped that bombshell, that was not a Dick Harpootlian smoke and mirrors operation. They brought the goods on the jury tampering. In fact, we think it may even be worse than that.
Right. And Becky Hill, I mean, she's now facing criminal charges, not for jury tampering.
Conveniently.
Right. But, it certainly further diminishes any credibility she would have had. So it is, I have a lot of questions about the integrity of what happened during that trial.
Absolutely. And again, as we've said so often, Jen, this was a case the state had to get right. So much attention, so much scrutiny, international documentaries, an international audience. This was a case South Carolina's much maligned justice system had to get right, and clearly they didn't do it, which is why we're probably going to be running this thing back.
Right.
Well, we had Attorney General Alan Wilson in here recently. He sat in this chair. We asked him about this case, and certainly he is confident that the verdicts will be upheld. However, they are going to have to put their money where their mouths are in the coming weeks. Jen, the Attorney General's office, finally, after many delays, will be submitting their highly anticipated, high-stakes response to Alec Murdaugh's formal appeal. That is due next month. Jen, let me ask you this. What are your expectations for that filing? What does the state of South Carolina have to do to, again, protect these verdicts?
It's all going to be based on case law. They're going to revert back to the standard that former Chief Justice Jean Toll used when she made that determination that, it would not have changed the outcome of the trial. But I would argue that it would have. I mean, we did have a juror testify that the comments that former clerk of court Becky Hill made to her affected her verdict.
And several other jurors pointed out that they heard those comments.
Right. So, I mean, it really is going to come down to case law, and it's not. But that is the most publicized part of that appeal. There are a lot of additional very credible points of appeal that Dick Harpootlian and Jim Griffin laid out, including the admission of the financial crimes as prior bad acts, the cell phone hacking expert.
Maggie Murdaugh's cell phone, correct. They're challenging the prosecution's timeline, and key components of the timeline.
Right, key components of that timeline. And, if this were to get retried, those financial crimes, he admitted guilt. He's convicted of those. So they are prior bad acts, and they are not likely to come back in. So we're going to see a whole different trial this time.
Yeah. Well, it is important to point out, and I want our audience to make sure they hear this, Alec Murdaugh is not getting out of jail anytime soon.
Nor should he.
Right. I mean, in the event a new trial is granted on the double homicide, he will remain in jail on the numerous financial crimes to which he has already pleaded guilty, serving over 20 years in the state system, and then on top of that, a 40-year federal sentence for the federal crimes which he has, again, pleaded guilty to.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there was some dispute with his attorneys over the severity of that sentence, but federal judge Richard Gergel already ruled in favor of the government. That sentence has been upheld. So Alec Murdaugh will be in jail until he is a very, very, very old man in the best case scenario for him. But certainly these two convictions, murder convictions secured by the state, still very, again, it's the centerpiece of, it was the trial of the century. Alan Wilson running for governor. A lot of the boost he received was tied to the exposure in this case, and credit to him. He picked the team that prosecuted this case, participated actively in the trial, taking a key witness there toward the end. So Alan Wilson's political stock soared in the aftermath of this verdict and has propelled him into front-runner status for governor of South Carolina. So there are a lot of implications. And I think also, Jen, we got to talk about the biggest implication, which is why I think there's so much pushback to the work that you're doing, to the work that we've done here at FITSNews, kind of exposing all this post-trial chicanery, is the fact that the justice system in South Carolina desperately wants this story to disappear.
Yeah.
Because they are so implicated in it, whether by accommodating Murdaugh's behavior, enabling Murdaugh's behavior, or in the case of some judges allegedly being part of the problem. So this is something that the trial lawyer lobby, they just want this to go away.
They do. And the integrity of this verdict, it's more than just, one rich guy, having a credible appeal. I mean, if he can't get a fair trial, it should concern all of us. If the justice system can do this to him, that could happen to any one of us. And so, there's like, well, he's just lucky because he has money to fight it. But, I guess in exposing these things, it provides some level of clarity for the rest of us. I think it's important.
Well, Jen, it's also important to remember that whatever happens at the state level with this appeal, Alec Murdaugh's chances at the federal level are even higher because the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals recognizes the very standard for jury tampering that his attorneys argued in front of former Chief Justice Jean Toll back in January 2024. So again, whatever happens at the state level, he's got a really good shot in front of a federal judge. And in fact, Murdaugh's case could even be the case that sets the new national standard for jury tampering. But you put it very well, Jen, it's not just about a rich guy, a high-profile case, and all these political forces surrounding it. It is about that fundamental right to a fair trial that each one of us have. And again, if they can take it from somebody that connected, they can take it from anybody. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. FITSNews, folks, has led the coverage of this story from the very beginning. It was the morning of June 8, 2021, when we first reported on the homicides at the heart of this story. Every twist and turn we have followed, not only leading up to the trial, but during the big trial and now in the aftermath with these allegations which have severely threatened the integrity not only of the investigation into Alec Murdaugh, but into the judicial process which resulted in the guilty verdicts against him. It has been an absolute roller coaster, but clearly, as the reporting from our Jen Wood indicates, just beginning this next chapter of this story. So certainly keep it tuned to FITSNews.com for the very latest on all these developments as the Murdaugh murders, crime, and corruption saga moves forward. So here at FITSNews, we hold judges accountable, we hold prosecutors accountable, and thanks to the dogged investigatory work of our lead investigative reporter, Andy Fancher, you now know we hold cops accountable too in a big way. Andy, it has been a banner year in South Carolina for law enforcement misconduct. Most of these major stories you've been leading, particularly the saga up in Spartanburg County of now former Sheriff Chuck Wright. But it was another incredibly busy week in the bad orchard that is South Carolina law enforcement. Take us on a tour of the state of what you've been covering the last few days, Andy.
Well, where do you want me to start, Will? Do you want me to start with the bad apples at the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office or the bad apples at the Anderson Police Department? Bad apples at SLED or bad apples at the York County Sheriff's Office? Bad apples at the North Charleston Police Department? I mean, where do you want me to start? Because I got my apple picking basket ready.
Hey, let's go, man. Anywhere on the map you want to start, man.
So I think to make it easier on not only myself but the viewers is to just start last Thursday when the true law enforcement of South Carolina really started showing themselves here. So again, last Thursday, we had a DUI arrest of a SLED agent, Jefferson Dorman, which in and of itself is unremarkable. A DUI arrest, it's a dime a dozen. But what's ironic is that Jefferson's arrest was the second DUI arrest of a SLED agent in a government vehicle in about a year. The only difference between Jefferson's arrest and the last one that we exclusively covered was that this one didn't take weeks of FOIA requests to the South Carolina Highway Patrol to confirm. So his mugshot was blasted across the airwaves, and of course he was terminated within the night, just like the last SLED agent arrested, Mark Berube. Of course, SLED Chief Mark Keel, who's about to be a recurring character in the story I'm about to tell, has a zero DUI policy, which I would hope any law enforcement agency in the state has. But his arrest was just the beginning of one of the more exciting weeks for badges gone bad in South Carolina, because shortly thereafter, we had the arrest, another DUI arrest, of an Anderson patrol sergeant, individual of supervisor authority, Shelby Millington. According to Highway Patrol, she struck a telephone pole with her Jeep, an off-duty incident, through a ditch, and landed in a culvert. Now again, this DUI arrest, they're a dime a dozen, but what was so provocative almost was the content on her public social media accounts that we pulled prior to her disabling them. And what we found was that this patrol sergeant, an individual, again, in a position of authority, well, not only are you a cop, but a supervisor authority, responsible for my understanding, overlooking incident reports as well as shift changes. She was posting alcohol-friendly fitness tips, which is not illegal. She's a fitness influencer, according to her. But then you scroll down and you see dollar bills in nightclubs. You see photos with fishbowl margaritas. You see, birthmarks on her butt. You see her twerking on fellow officers with her tongue out. And it just makes you wonder, is this really the best that Anderson PD could get?
It's all fun and games till you put the public in danger by going behind the wheel.
Well, it's all fun and games, yeah, until an Anderson officer gets behind the wheel off duty, because she's not the first arrest of an Anderson PD officer within the past 4 weeks. All right, so if we rewind just within a month, I should say, we have the arrest of 33-year-old fellow officer, rookie cop, only 18 months out of the academy, Paige Newell, who was accused of pointing and presenting a firearm at a vehicle full of children, again, off duty, somewhere around Interstate 85 in Spartanburg. And what, again, I find so ironic about this particular case, which was the second arrest of an Anderson PD officer within a month, is that the arresting agency of Paige Newell was the Welford Police Department. I don't know if you recall our story on the Welford Police Department, but we slammed them pretty hard when they hired an officer, Sidney Tyson, who, prior to even joining law enforcement, had allegedly admitted in a hidden recording to selling more drugs than a convicted felon, weed and cocaine specifically. Those recordings were readily available before, again, she went into law enforcement. And within a couple of months of her in law enforcement, she actually lost her law enforcement certification. But fear not, though, because SLED Chief Mark Keel, the guy who has that zero DUI enforcement policy, apparently has a soft spot for girls who allegedly admit to selling weed and cocaine. Because he said that she was of good moral turpitude and compass and that she was good to return to law enforcement. And I digress. That agency, Welford Police Department, was the one who arrested Paige Newell, which was the first of 2 Anderson PD officers arrested.
Badges gone wild in the
month.
upstate.
That
man.
is a badge gone wild segment if I know one. But in the immortal words of Billy Mays, I'm not stopping there because that's not where this week ended. We have now on Monday, this is just Monday because now we've made it now to Monday of this week. We have the 4th South Carolina sheriff this year to make headlines for a criminal investigation. For recap, earlier this year, FITSNews exclusively reported on the arrest of ex-Colleton County Sheriff Andy Strickland for a second domestic violence charge. All right, that was in February. And within a month of ex-Sheriff Andy Strickland getting popped with DV for the second time in his life, we had Williamsburg County Sheriff Stephen Gardner get indicted at the state level on a series of public corruption charges. Right, and it's just one bad apple. It's just one bad apple everywhere.
Right.
So then, coming to our 3rd sheriff to befall bad headlines this year is, of course, as you mentioned in the introduction, the beloved and most Christian, if you ask him, sheriff of South Carolina, one of the longest sitting sheriffs of 21 years on his 5th term, Spartanburg Sheriff Chuck Wright resigns from office after FITSNews exclusively reported on him, the state ethics probe being launched into him, the criminal probe being launched, the federal grand jury being impaneled, the machine guns that he was allegedly in possession of illegally, his alleged pill dependency, his alleged cohorts, a member of these criminal organizations, his resurfacing 4 weeks after going missing amid a federal probe, and of course the network of illegal gambling kingpins that, if you follow the finances, appear to lead right to Chuck Wright's pocket, as well as multiple members of his department. But noticeably missing from all of our very exclusive coverage of the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office is nobody from the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office reaching out to us in an official capacity asking, who are these deputies connected to the gambling institutions, the illegal gambling networks? But I digress, because we're not talking about those bad apples. We're talking about one bad apple at the York County Sheriff's Office. Ex-bad apple, I should say. So on Sunday night is when former York County Sheriff Kevin Tolson's great unraveling begins. According to sources, Tolson hit a telephone pole.
There's a lot of telephone poles in this story this weekend.
A lot of reoccurring themes in this story. But we've got a telephone pole hit, we've got a fence hit, and then we have a hit and run. That's at least according to authorities. It's worth noting South Carolina Highway Patrol, who provided a great deal of the details that I just read off, have not disclosed any information regarding Tolson's subsequent arrest. But again, according to sources who predicted this hours before it made airwaves, and it's worth noting we also exclusively reported on that arrest. So again, according to sources, Tolson sped out somewhere in Rock Hill on Airport Road, fled from the scene. By 9 a.m. Monday morning, I'm told a warrant was issued for his arrest, which was simple, fleeing,
Right.
failing to report an incident. And he was taken into custody around 11 o'clock.
It's almost
Monday
like someone
morning.
in that position would know to flee, because if you stick around and you may have had a drink or two, that's a lot worse than hours later they catch up with you, the warrant catches you, and you've got a chance to...
And you get popped with fleeing and you keep your license. And, we're
not saying he was drunk. We're not saying he was drunk.
We're not
but
going to say he's drunk, but we are going to show his mugshot. And we'll let the audience decide whether the bloodshot eyes...
That's how long after the arrest?
The nosy red cheeks, or the rosy red cheeks and the red nose.
It's disappointing because, this was a guy, he was a very strong proponent. He came in this studio, very
Right.
strong proponent of judicial reform, but then there was some chicanery when he was leaving office, trying to sort of let his wife ease in without competition. Is that right?
It was a bait and switch.
Yeah.
So this man who was running in an unopposed election for re-election, it would have been his third re-election, because I believe he became sheriff in 2016, right? And then in 2024, he was running uncontested, and then he announces, I believe it was after the filing period closed, that he was no longer running. But fear not, York County, because about 45 minutes before that filing period had closed, his wife filed to run for the county's top
Sure,
cop.
they didn't talk about it.
Oh, no,
I'm sure it was
not at all. His wife of 27 years, there was
no idea.
Nothing was conspired at this moment. And she was essentially going to be the only name on the November ballot until that bait and switch caused so much stir, specifically from Republicans out that way, that the York County Republican Party had to reopen the filing period. And then what we had were 4 additional candidates hop in. She didn't even make the runoff. Mm-hmm. And then the candidate that her and Kevin Tolson endorsed lost. Mm-hmm. So it
didn't work.
A visceral failure.
Yeah.
And then, of course, months and months later, we have Kevin Tolson fleeing the scene of an accident, which you'd think a sheriff would know better. But if there was alleged drinking involved, because why else would you flee, then he most certainly would know better. But what's funny is the story doesn't end there, because we found out that ex-Sheriff Tolson is a current sitting elected trustee to the York Electric Co-op, or YEC, which is a utility provider that provides to approximately 67,000 people across the Midlands and upstate region. YEC has confirmed with FITSNews that, at least at the time of this recording, he is still a sitting member of that board, that they are awaiting additional details regarding this arrest, as we are.
What was it, their power line that got knocked down by this car?
Now, we don't know if any power line was knocked down. Okay.
He hit a pole.
He did hit a pole, and then
allegedly,
according to the probable cause affidavit,
correct,
he hit a pole. But the co-op did confirm that there was a power outage the same morning as Tolson's alleged incident. However, they did emphasize that that was caused by a tree. Other people on Facebook noted that there was a power outage within that Airport Road, Rock Hill area. Again, whether it's at all related to Tolson's alleged crash out, or if it's just a coincidence, it remains unclear. Mm-hmm. And while I commend the York County Sheriff's Office for ultimately confirming that Tolson was arrested, as well as providing us with the probable cause affidavits, that county was once again an echo chamber reminder of the transparency issues in South Carolina, specifically the York County Detention Center. Because I've got a bone to pick with them now. All right? I mean, not
pick
only...
away, brother. Pick away.
Not only are cops not above us, they are by us. I would say that the same applies to the detention centers, where we can eventually be transported by the officers who are by us, not above us. Nonetheless, when he was arrested, when Tolson was booked, his information was available on the York County Detention Center's website briefly. I mean, it appears as though within minutes it was put up because it had to, and then taken down. At the time of this recording, I have not seen anything regarding his arrest in the public index, which is even a greater issue. But with the York County Detention Center, that morning we called them because we were seeking his mugshot. There was, of course, a screenshot provided of his booking information before, again, it was taken down almost immediately. And what the detention center staff told me was, we can't do that. We can't provide you this photo, which I've never heard from detention centers. In fact, when Andy Strickland, when Andy Strickland was arrested, that detention center down there, they tried to find his mugshot. They couldn't, but they tried. All right. This one simply said they couldn't. I said, why not? Let me send you to my supervisor. Ring, 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 voicemail. So I called him back again. And I said, okay, in the absence of a mugshot that y'all can't provide for whatever reason, can you confirm that Kevin Tolson was booked this morning? Hang up. And in that
Watching
recording,
out for somebody, Andy.
in that recording, you can hear me laugh after they just hang up the landline, because of course that call was being recorded as well as on my end too. One party state, everybody remember that.
Yep.
But that transparency issue echoes far beyond the Midlands. Earlier this week, we had kicked out a report on the North Charleston Police Department, which, as you are very familiar with, as somebody who has written and published incessantly on NCPD, is a department with problems.
Serious problems. Yeah.
And you know that a police department has problems when multiple officers are talking to FITSNews, because it's not popular for a cop to talk to FITSNews. I commend him for doing it. And I talk with law enforcement officers at various levels of the machine on a daily basis for this gig. And I commend them. You know, we don't always agree on everything, but it's unity. We can live together and coexist nonetheless.
Well, they don't want the bad orchard out there. I mean, a lot of these folks, they're adversely impacted when their colleagues engage in behavior like this or try to hide the ball, like this case.
Well, in fact, you know, I get messages a lot asking, why don't you report on any positive stories regarding law enforcement? And let me challenge that. What is a more feel-good story than getting a bad apple out of the orchard?
Yeah. Especially if some good cops help get it done. I got no problem with that.
It's always good cops helping get it done. And there's nothing a good cop loves more than seeing a bad cop out of the ranks. All right. And that's what we're attempting to effectuate in North Charleston right now.
Well, walk us through what happened down there.
Sure. So I suppose in order to understand where we are now, like with all of these cases, we have to go back. You've got a now Associate Chief Karen Cadre, who sometime last year befell bad press when a council member, rather than obeying the lawful commands of an NCPD officer, called Associate Chief Cadre. You reported on this extensively. This is the what did you call it? The disc jockey saga. What was it?
Something with the DJ, Jerome Hayward.
The disc jockey drama saga of Councilman Jerome Hayward, who was eventually indicted at the federal level, right, for another public corruption scandal that took down two different members of the North Charleston City Council. All of this
Just a few more bad apples.
Just a few more bad apples. All of this, of course, occurring under the mayor, who was previously the NCPD police chief. But hey, there's nothing to look at here, folks. Please move along. So, nonetheless, Cadre befell bad press because of her alleged handling of this Jerome Hayward incident. So, Jerome Hayward did not abide by her subordinate's orders. Her subordinate eventually wrote up in his incident report that he decided not to issue a noise complaint to the sitting councilman, and ultimately decided that he was just going to flesh it out in his incident report. Well, within a couple months, he files a misconduct complaint against Cadre for allegedly attempting to clean up the incident report regarding this noise complaint. In fact, I think you had discovered as well that the text message requesting the cleanup occurred in the wake of us deploying a FOIA request for document and recordings pertaining to that incident.
Yeah.
All right, so
Got caught with their hands in the cookie jar.
the city's internal affairs, or human resources more so, they furthermore determined that during the internal investigation, Cadre was not entirely truthful, provided information that was deceitful or inaccurate. So why are we talking about this old story again? Because Cadre has inserted herself into yet another FITSNews FOIA request. Earlier this year, in fact, 111 days before we finally got the records back, we had deployed a FOIA for what at face value was a wholly unremarkable traffic stop involving an officer who appears to have done the right thing and a black activist named Ronald Stunna Smith. Ronald Stunna Smith had been featured on the NCPD's Facebook page during Black History Month. There's photos that we embedded in the report of him with the mayor, previous police chief, who also promoted Associate Chief Karen Cadre back in 2018 during a visit to her mom's house. You know, the tides don't run deep in North Charleston. So what we have during this traffic stop that we didn't uncover until 111 days after filing a Freedom of Information Act request is Smith appearing to get a little belligerent with this officer when he was pulled over for unlawful tent. All right, that's what it was. It was unlawful tent. According to the incident report, Smith was cussing at the officer who's no longer with the department. Conveniently, that officer was booted after we deployed the FOIA request. Go figure that.
I'm sure it's unrelated.
So it's always a coincidence. It's always a coincidence, Will. And what we have after this incident, you see, there were some discrepancies involving Smith's license plate. So the license plate was ultimately seized. It was purportedly, according to the officer, in violation of some DMV rules and state code of laws. So the license plate was seized. All right. Why are we talking about this traffic stop? All right. That sounds, again,
pretty germane. Yeah,
pretty germane.
Yeah.
Well, after that officer cleared the scene, he got a call from a superior stating that he was no longer going to surrender the black activist's license plate to the DMV, and he was furthermore instructed to stand by and wait where you're at for further instructions. So the cop, who I imagine is scratching his head at this moment, stands by for further instructions. Yet another superior calls him, says he's going to come pick up the license plate from you, Mr. Cop, and then he's going to take the license plate back to the black activist. Doesn't make much sense, does it? I referred to several officers, specifically in the Low Country, regarding this. I said, have you ever seen anything like this? And it was a resounding no. Now, we don't exactly know what happened during that traffic stop because we were not provided the audio from the dash-mounted camera video of that traffic stop. All we see is, of course, the vehicle getting lit up. We see Ronald Stunna Smith pointing excitedly at the officer. We see the license plate coming off, and then we see his truck, after the license plate is off, drive away. Now, you would think that a department committed to transparency would have left no room for the imagination, as well as no room for us to accuse them of delaying a FOIA request nearly 3 times over the legal limit, which it was. For recap here, under South Carolina law, or FOIA law, more so, depending on which records you're requesting, but as it relates to this case, an agency must acknowledge the FOIA request within 10 business days. They must say we're going to do it or it's denied, right? Not only did they take 2 weeks to do that, so not only were they over on that initial request, following that, per law, an agency is required to provide any responsive documents within 30 business days. Yet again, it took them 111, which only came after repeated emails to the town's attorneys, which was followed up with emails from Cadre herself to me, apologizing for the confusion and delay. And when she provided, finally in piecemeal fashion, the dash camera video of this incident, which again was muted, there was no audio, it was just static, I said, well, what's going on here? So I was provided some lip service, and my final email to her was, for confirmation, your department could release the body-worn camera video, which is exempt under law for whatever reason, but you're choosing not to. So we published the report. Obviously, I never claimed to be someone who has answers. I claim to be someone looking for answers. But what we have is an incident that is not passing the smell test. And rather than in the wake of our sweeping expose, release the body camera video, Cadre takes to Facebook, essentially calling us a liar, and then on her personal Facebook page, claims to be so committed to transparency that I'm going to release all the emails between FITSNews and myself. Okay, that's great, but what about the body-worn camera video?
Yeah.
So we've got transparency issues galore. We've got bad apples galore. And I suppose that until we recognize there's a problem here, this is going to continue.
Yeah. Well, Andy, it's not just the bad behavior. It's the efforts, it sounds in this case, to try to cover it up, to try to keep that from becoming public. You know, as I was following this story, because I read your report, read the responses from North Charleston, and the thing I posted on social media to all law enforcement agencies in the state is, look, if Andy is asking for something that he's legally entitled to receive, public information, give it to him. Give it to him, because let me tell you something, if you don't, he's not going to stop.
Well, it's not a me thing. It's a public thing. All right. I'm a member of the public. All right. And of course, we work at an institution that is upholding that fourth pillar of democracy, which mainstream media appears to have forgotten is even there. Speaking as somebody who used to work in mainstream media, but seriously, it's the 3 R's. All right. That's what it's going to take to get at least to a position that I feel is one where we're not going to be endangered by a reckless cop. All right. Reveal, reform, respect. But we can't even get past the reveal part yet.
Yeah. Andy, man, you've been incredibly busy this week, incredibly busy this year. I almost want to say, I wish you weren't so busy, because then we would. But I tell you what, I think, and we hit on it earlier, the work you're doing, not only exposing these bad cops and the sometimes corrupt folks that are in positions above them trying to cover this stuff up, sweep stuff under the rug. Not only is it important for public safety, but as we mentioned earlier, it's important for those law enforcement officers who are actually upholding their duty to protect and serve. And it is certainly important for those of us taxpayers funding all of this. That's why we do this, is to try to keep our streets safe, to try to keep our communities safe. But when we can't trust the people who are sworn to do that, again, the whole thing crumbles. So, Andy, you've done amazing work on this. And again, I commend you not only for exposing the bad behavior, but for doggedly pursuing when it is swept under the rug.
Thank you, Will.
So there's no media outlet in South Carolina more committed to judicial reform and justice for victims of violent crimes than FITSNews. We've covered extensively how our system fails to protect those who deserve it the most. But there's also a flip side to that coin. And this week we had the privilege of sitting down with Larry Benjamin, a convicted killer who served more than 30 years in South Carolina's correctional system. I interviewed Larry and we discussed a whole host of topics, including his work now as an outreach director at Transitions, a homeless center in downtown Columbia, South Carolina. My conversation with Larry is a poignant reminder that not all second chances are wasted. In fact, some not only benefit the individual who received that chance, but countless others. Here's an excerpt from my interview with Larry.
Guys jumped on me and beat me up pretty bad, and I couldn't focus. I didn't have the understanding of what it meant. I'm going to make a decision now, right? And this decision is going to be a split-second decision, and I'm about to take something that I could never give back again in life. And once I took this life, I lost a piece of my life, and everything was like in slow motion.
So you remember it?
It was like in slow motion, like a piece of my soul, a piece of my body just separated, and it was just like an out-of-body experience. It's happening, but I'm not doing it, I'm watching it. It's like watching a movie. And then when reality sets in, it's like you actually lose a part of yourself. You lose a piece of your soul. And you never forget that. You never forget that, because you're never able to replace that piece of your soul. You're never able to find it, so it's always there, And as I grew older, as I started to understand, the thing bothers me the most now, almost 40 years from that particular night, is the screams, the cries that my mother heard, that I heard out of my mother's voice and her soul, how she cried and screamed about what I have done. It was the identical same cries and screams that my victim's mother was screaming. It was like they were mirroring each other. So With that being said, I would never want to put that type of hurt or pain on my mother or any other mother, because it's identical, because both parents lost, both families lost. This guy could have been the guy who could have cured cancer. You know, he could have been our second black president. Hell, I don't know. But he could have been a whole lot of things. But at that particular time, because I wasn't able to process in time enough, I played judge and juror at the same time. I played God with somebody's life. Prison was not fun and games. Prison was a struggle. Prison was painful. Sometimes the Bible says Jesus wept, right? They had a guy sung a song, say, one single teardrop fell yesterday, right? That meant I don't have any more tears. I didn't cry as much as I could cry. I don't have any more of that. So if you get a single teardrop, if you get a single tear, I'm internalizing the pain, the suffering, the anguish, but it's not your pain for you to handle, it's mine. So now how do I handle it? It's not, some days I'm like, damn, is this natural light or manufactured light? You know, this air that I'm breathing, this is manufactured air. This is not natural air. So that's the thing. We're locked up. We're not breathing natural air. We don't get natural sunlight because we're confined in these buildings all the time. That's where the anger, that's where the frustration, that's where the hurt and the pain is. That's why it's lashing out. If you allow me to go out in the yard, go out to recreation, lift weights, shoot basketball, learn a trade, do whatever, I burn off negative energy. And I felt like I didn't accomplish something through the day, you know? So I didn't accomplish something. I got a GED, I did this, I got a trade. So I'm accomplishing things. But if I'm just confined, I'm not. And to go back to what you were saying, there was a lot of, many days that I didn't get in the bed. I felt like getting under the bed. I didn't get into the bed, I felt like getting under the bed. But that's where your support system comes in. Your support system comes in. I'll call you, yo, man, I'm having one of them days, man. So, man, what's up? So now we start talking. These are not family members, because your family is in your community. You start to develop bonds, right? And the guys that's back there, that's where my friends are. They know me better than anybody know me. And so when you're having a bad day, I don't have time to sit here and cater to your bad day. Let's address this and move on. Let's address this bad day and move on. What's the problem? What? You worrying about your woman? What do you mean you worrying about your woman? Man, come on. You worrying about your mama? Okay.
Different story.
Yeah, you mad at, it's a different story. You mad at your brother, you mad at your sister, somebody didn't send you? Stop. Let's face reality. Let's put this where it's supposed to be, right? As hard as it may be. Your family didn't abandon you. You abandoned the family. So when you go to prison, your family didn't abandon you. You abandoned your family by making the choices you made, right? And then the prison didn't call you and say, hey, what you doing, man? Come on, hang out with us. I got a bed for you. They didn't call you on the phone. You kept throwing rocks until you broke their window and they opened the door for you. So all these things have to play a part, but it's hard to process it because you don't want to. Pain, suffering, all these things is hard. It hurts. You cry, you wonder, you hope, you pray, then you get angry all over again, and you have to rebuild the process. So until you're able to exercise different forms of suicide to kill the demons that dwell within you. You know, I've never been crazy enough to kill myself, but to kill the demons that were dwelling in me, the anger, the hate, the frustration, the malice in my heart, those are demons.
So we don't have time on the program to show you that full interview. I wish we did, but if you want to check out that entire conversation with Larry Benjamin, go to FITSNews.com. All right, folks, that is a wrap for this week's edition of Your Week in Review. Once again, I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and I specifically want to thank those of you who subscribe to FITSNews.com, the mothership, the site where we post all the information related to the stories that we cover here and countless others. If you support this brand of investigative journalism, these deep dives into these compelling narratives, please consider subscribing to FITSNews.com today. Thanks, and we'll catch you next time on Your Week in Review.